Hey everybody, welcome back to 312, the HRP podcast. Today we are with Jonathan Borntrager. Jonathan, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are here at HRP and what brought you here.
Yeah, hey Tom, my name is Jonathan Borntrager. I am new here with HRP as the Corporate Health and Safety Officer. It is a fantastic organization. I'm very excited to be a part of it and to try and contribute to the team. The culture here is wonderful, and I think we prioritize many things that are very important to me as a person individually and as a professional. So I am unbelievably excited to be here.
Awesome. And can you describe for us what your position is, what the nature of that job is?
My position requires a lot of kind of being nimble and responsive to a lot of unique and ever-changing business needs that we support clients with. My role specifically is to try and help internally with health and safety parameters with our offices, our employees, as well as some external clients. So I try to work a bit independently as well as collaboratively within our teams to, as cliche as it is, make sure that people go home with fingers and toes at the end of the day.
So what are some of the primary duties that you're fulfilling in that role?
Sure. So helping to develop environmental health and safety written policies and procedures, implement those procedures so they're not just sitting up on the shelves, but where the rubber meets the road to make sure that they are indeed implemented, conducting training, initial trainings for new hires that we might onboard, as well as ongoing training. Externally, I try to help with some gap analysis for different companies that might have some gaps that needs bridging for health and safety elements, as well as external training, industrial hygiene, air sampling kind of analysis, and many other parameters. But that's the succinct version of things.
Cool. And where are you located? Which office are you part of?
I actually work in a remote office out of Asheville, North Carolina, but I am under the umbrella of our Greenville, South Carolina office.
Awesome. Are you a Asheville native?
I am not. I am from the greater Appalachia area. I spent many years in Tennessee before moving to North Carolina, but I am from the region and have been here quite some time.
Tell us a little bit about your background before coming to HRP.
Sure. So I think I bring a unique skill set here to HRP. I've spent some time in the regulatory compliance world with different entities, including OSHA as a industrial hygiene inspector. I've spent time in different health departments throughout the region doing environmental health and safety specialist types of roles. I've also worked with a couple different universities, North Carolina State University, Western Carolina University as an adjunct instructor, and currently still serving as an affiliate instructor with Georgia Tech University. I've spent many years as well in those roles as a consultant, and have recently onboarded with HRP to try and continue to build those skill sets and capabilities.
And how do you feel some of that past experience has informed or helped your role here at HRP?
So I think here with HRP, there is a growth mindset, and that we try to continue to grow and expand our capabilities. I think that those previous careers have laid the foundation for me with continuing our internal and external education endeavors, as well as continuing to grow some different facets of environmental health and safety, again, internally and externally, to support our needs to mitigate risk as much as possible and to try and do that same role for our external clients.
So what was it that made you want to come to HRP to be a part of it, the culture here?
You know, honestly, our leadership team introduced me to a YouTube video from the anniversary celebration from 2022. And when I saw some of the culture that was there, some of the founders of the organization, the H, the R, and the P, that their beliefs and the current leadership, I think, mirrored that a lot, as well as the fact that there is a well-established alumni association. You know, I don't think a lot of employers have that type of embracing of previous employers. Sometimes the opportunity, folks just move on to other endeavors, and the slate is kind of wiped clean. So I think that those relationships are continued to be fostered is amazing, and that's pretty rare, in my opinion, in an organization.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because we are actually going to be using the second half of this podcast after we have concluded our discussion here to talk to Everett Anderson, who will be leaving HRP in the next few weeks. So we've got a hello to you as you start your career here at HRP, and a farewell to a much valued employee and friend. And it's a really great part of what makes HRP that we are able to maintain those connections, friendships with former employees.
And I agree with that, Tom. That's what set the hook for me to come on board here, is seeing some of those, you're right, not just professional relationships, but personal ones, those friendships that seem like they're going to be long-lasting. And the fact that that's the mindset here with HRP, to continue to cultivate those relationships and foster them long-term, even after folks' tenures as an employee has ended.
So tell us a little bit about Asheville. I've heard it's a pretty cool city. I've been meaning to check it out.
Asheville is a very interesting location. I think for me personally, the reason I located there is many of the outdoor lifestyle opportunities there, the ability to hike in some wonderful mountains, some of the most beautiful foliage in the area. I like to mountain bike as well as kayak. So personally, those are big hobbies for me. So just a very laid back, calm lifestyle seems to fit my life at this point. Yeah.
I really like that the way fall looks in that part of the South. Being from the Northeast, the autumn colors really get hyped up for us. But it was neat to see how that looks in a different area. It's kind of like checking out the differences of it. It's much drier at the time anyway.
It is, and that's another thing I like about the area as well. There seems to be generally a lot of greenery that's there. Having green trees instead of a concrete jungle is an appealing factor to me.
Definitely. All right, Jonathan, we've established you've got the bona fides of a certified health and safety expert. So you're the perfect person to ask about our theme for this Work Hard segment, which is the top workplace safety hazards out there. And I think this is also a great opportunity to talk about how HRP is here to support mitigating those risks, those dangers, those hazards. So what is the first one that you want to tell us about?
So I think that the trends indicate that there are a lot of occupational injuries that happen, and the trends consistently have 5 that are atop that list. So generally speaking, a third of occupational injuries are attributable to slip, trips, and falls within the workplace. I think here at HRP, that's our focal point when we're going out and conducting our health and safety analyses, is to try and mitigate those types of risks. As far as the other 4 that are trending consistently, so again, slip, trips, falls generally leads the list. Then there's what's referred to as struck by and caught between. So for example, struck by a moving piece of equipment, an earth-moving piece of equipment that might not have a backup alarm that's engaged as it should be, not functioning properly. Caught between is another common one. So, or caught in a moving piece of equipment that may not be properly guarded. Say, for example, it's a conveyor belt that's moving along, and someone has long hair or a loose article of clothing that might get caught in that. That can lead to an injury. Another very common one, number 4 often on the list, is electrical hazards. So people that may be working on energized pieces of equipment to perform various service and maintenance tasks. That can lead to an electric shock or, unfortunately, even more extreme circumstances. And then kind of a 5th one that's commonly on the list for the trends is ergonomic type of injuries. People that may have repetitive motion types of exposures or overexerting themselves that can lead to injury. So those 5 areas are really kind of our focus 5 when we're going out to different employers to try and support their needs. And those are the trends that the literature shows are where the most risks are at that we try to mitigate.
Perfect. So bullet out for me, summarize those focus 5 and like that, the brief as possible. Give me that list.
The trends are for recordable injuries for the focus 5, and typically atop the list is slip, trips, and falls. The other 4 that we focus on are struck by, so struck by a moving piece of equipment, caught in, something that may be ineffectively guarded, electrical hazards, which are pretty straightforward, and lastly is ergonomics, people overexerting themselves or repetitive motion types of issues.
Okay, so slip, trips, and falls seems like it can be a huge category, like very broad. And I was even thinking, like, when we think about the term workplace, how do we even define that? Like, what would be the definition of workplace in this context?
So basically, from a regulatory standpoint, the answer to what is a workplace is wherever there is an established employer-employee relationship. Employees are getting paid for services that are being rendered. And in terms of slips, trips, and falls, OSHA commonly refers to those as walking working surfaces. And succinctly, that's anywhere you put your feet. So stairs, ladders, floors, mezzanines, things of that nature.
Yeah. So are the solutions that HRP provides for this hazard something that can be generalized and in that sense kind of simplified to specific points, or is it as broad and varied as the category that it addresses?
I would say the latter probably. It's broad and varied because there's so many different types of workplaces. We're not all cookie cutter with where we're at. It could be from an old warehouse to a restaurant to a manufacturer that has a mezzanine, or construction folks that may be working on a ladder. So unfortunately, it's not very generalized. It's a lot more broad.
Okay. So when you go into make assessments, make recommendations, everything's going to be pretty much tailored to that workplace, right?
Correct. Our goal is to go in with a different set of eyes to try and look at the specifics of that job site and make those recommendations that are site specific to the hazards that they're encountering at that particular job site.
Mm-hmm. And how do we make sure that those site-specific recommendations are compliant or work with the ways in which they're being regulated? How are we able to tie something so specific into a broad category of regulation?
Well, there's several regulatory bodies that are out there that we try to focus on when we're conducting these. Obviously, the big one that we are often engaged with from a workplace safety perspective is OSHA. OSHA regulations are going to be a very common one. Another one that we can potentially look at is ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. For example, if an employer has someone who may be mobility impaired, then we need to make sure that those needs are being accommodated appropriately. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, there are some just industry best practices that we might utilize, so consensus standards that are recommendations that may be best for industries that to follow.
So slip, trip, and falls, what is our next workplace hazard?
Struck by. For example, at a construction site, if employees are working around those and there's heavy earth moving equipment that might be moving around, having some training to lay the foundation that might be supported by some written policies and procedures, and then, as I mentioned, periodic audits or safety assessments, gap analysis, things of that nature to try and look at. In terms of struck by, though, if there's a piece of equipment that may not have a backup alarm that's working properly, someone turns around and cannot hear it, obviously they're at risk of potentially being struck by that moving piece of equipment. Mm-hmm. So we try to identify those hazards and correct them or make recommendations to correct them.
Yeah. And is this primarily done through an EH&S audit?
Primarily it's done through an EHS audit, but depending upon the client needs, there may be different tiers that we can support with. Maybe they don't have any written policies in place, or maybe they do. Mm-hmm. If we need to establish some of those and support that with supplemental training, then that's certainly a capability within HRP that we can help with.
Okay. What are some of the trainings that are offered that help mitigate this risk?
Well, for this particular risk, obviously for the operators, making sure that they are doing pre-shift inspection to look at the equipment, that all the safety features that are in place are working as they should be. For pedestrians that might be on the ground, kind of a situational awareness training where they are aware of the situation, looking around to verify that the equipment that's running the safety features are working and just are aware when it is actively running. Some common sense things, not to turn their back on that, things of that nature. Next
up would be caught between?
Yes, caught between or caught in. So from that standpoint, it's kind of similar. Primarily with that, it would be more of the gap analysis. So walking around the facility or the construction site to see if there are moving parts that are where employees may come into contact and could potentially get exposed and caught in.
Does making an analysis like that consist of having to know the specifics of the machine or equipment, or is that a assessment that a person can make simply by being able to look at a moving part and understand that it is not specifically covered? I guess in this sense, does the regulation require that all those moving parts be covered, or is it some things can be exposed and you have to really know the specifics of the equipment? Well,
Tom, I'm kind of give you an evasive answer on this, and it's it depends situation. Unfortunately, It depends on what that equipment specific hazard is. Not all conveyors are made exactly the same, so they could be slightly different. Not all augers or other equipment is cookie cutter, so it may be a specific assessment for that piece of equipment. Now, generally, you can default back to the manufacturer's written guidelines. Hopefully, that piece of equipment, as it's procured, has a guard that's in place that can be utilized. Unfortunately, a lot of times, some folks feel that it might be more practical or more productive to remove those guards, which can ultimately expose them to some of those hazards. So when we are doing that guarding assessment, that's something we're looking for. As an example, let's say it's a circular handheld saw. Some people may wedge a shim in there to prevent that guard from engaging as it should and kicking back once the saw has completed its cycle. So part of the assessment for that is making sure those sheets aren't put in place to protect it against the manufacturer's guard as it's installed, and then to have a training to educate folks. This is why it's there, to make sure that you're not exposed to that risk.
All right, Jonathan, which hazard is up next?
Electrical hazards. And I think we've all had some experience with that. I'll make myself vulnerable here for a minute. Ironically, as a kid, I did the old licking of the 9-volt battery test, and then I grew up to be a safety professional, go figure. But as an adult, there are definitely some other electrical hazards that are out there. I would imagine that all of us have seen at the home front a electrical cord that might have the ground pin that's been broken off from pulling it out too quickly or something along those lines. Or perhaps the outer insulation of the electrical cord is damaged to where the copper wire might be exposed. And if it's something that's plugged into an outlet, obviously that could be an electrical hazard.
What are some of the ways in which people may be exposed to electrical hazards that they are not aware of? Some of the counterintuitive ways or unsuspecting ways that this particular one can sneak up on you?
So a fairly common one in industry is for a piece of equipment to be in need of service or maintenance. If in-house maintenance staff are available to come and provide that service and maintenance activity, it's very important that they de-energize that equipment and utilize what's referred to as lockout-tagout procedures to ensure that it's not going to unexpectedly start up or be energized while they're performing that activity. So lockout-tagout is a very common mitigation tool that's used to protect against electricals for service and maintenance types of activities.
We have a great video on lockout tagout on our YouTube page, so people, if you haven't seen that, check it out. And Jonathan, for those people that haven't watched it yet, can you just briefly tell us what lockout tagout is and what that consists of and why it's so important?
Sure. Lockout tagout basically refers to when a piece of equipment is in need of service and maintenance, a process, a standard operating process to try and move forward with, to logically, step-by-step, verify that that piece of equipment's energy sources are isolated. Typically, it's going to refer to electrical hazards, but it's possible there could be some other energy sources, pneumatic or gravity or other stored energy types. So it's very important that the personnel who are developing these lockout-tagout procedures are able to recognize what those hazardous energy sources are and eliminate them before moving forward with that service and maintenance task.
Okay, similarly to the electrical hazard and lockout tagout, we have a couple of excellent videos, again on the YouTube channel, about ergonomics, which is our next workplace hazard. So what can you tell us about ergonomics as a workplace hazard?
So ergonomics from a workers' compensation standpoint is pretty high on their list. It's often in the top 10. In fact, there are several of injuries that may be attributable to that. So for example, people that may be overexerting themselves by lifting something that's too heavy. It's a 100-pound piece of equipment that's bulky and awkward. So an individual trying to lift that by themselves without having a buddy system in place or other mechanical means could overexert themselves and sustain an injury. Other ergonomic issues can be things like carpal tunnel syndrome. So it's a repetitive motion issue. For example, folks that are doing a lot of data entry and typing in a lot on their keyboard, over time, if it's not a well-designed workstation, could develop that type of an issue. So we here at HRP try to go out and conduct ergonomic assessments of various workstations and mitigate those risks by designing the workstation to the employee as much as possible.
So that is our Focus 5. I keep wanting to say Fatal 5, which sounds like a group that Spider-Man would fight. But those are the Focus 5 for workplace hazards. So Jonathan, what are some of the big ways, the big examples going on right now where HRP is tackling the Focus 5, both internally and externally?
So different areas that I think we try to achieve those goals to mitigate the risk as much as we can for employers. So I know it's a big buzzword these days, but sustainability is a big element of that. So when we are assisting clients in those needs and identifying those gaps, how do we bridge those gaps? Sometimes by having written programs and procedures in place, conducting training and follow-up assessments or audits depending upon the client's needs. But in terms of sustainability, I think that's kind of part of the building that culture within the workplace to make sure that we are ensuring that employees are healthy and safe. It's just part of a core value for part of the program to maintain that.
So we're thinking about internal, external, specific examples of how we are tackling those Focus 5. A lot of it is through training. So what are some of those ways in which HRP is training people? What are some of those trainings that we're focusing on?
Sure. So there's a couple elements to that. One of the big areas of training that we help with supporting internally and externally is conducting what is referred to as an OSHA 10-hour general industry or construction industry hazard awareness training. So the 10-hour classes are geared more towards rank and file laborers. So it's not over-educating them on all of the regulatory standards per se, but hazard recognition. So if it has the potential to hurt you, the ability to recognize, and more importantly, hopefully the authority to correct those hazards, that's more geared towards the 30-hour types of classes for supervisors. So 10 hours is more for the awareness, 30 hours is recognizing those hazards. So those 5 significant trends where the injuries are most likely to happen, that's where we should focus our efforts. So educating individuals that are in the class to try and be aware of some of those and how to take corrective actions to mitigate as much as possible is the goal for training. With that in mind, one of the specific topics that's covered for them in terms of slip, trips, falls is fall protection. So, for example, I'm in an industry where I am working at elevation and am concerned about the risk of falling to lower level. How do I protect myself from that? So we can discuss things like developing or installing guardrails are in place. If that's not an option, then often the case is exploring wearing personal fall arrest systems or fall protection devices. So lanyards and harnesses and anchor points and things of that nature, how to tie off to reduce the risk of the possibility of falling down to lower level and sustaining an injury. So that is a big focal point, with that being the typically most common type of injury that's out there.
Yeah, tell us a little more about some of the other procedures, the other capabilities that HRP has for the Focus 5.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit more about that struck by or caught in between hazard. For our assessments of employers, if we're visiting a site, that's something that we can help as subject matter experts with identifying where those risks are at. For a lot of employers, they can kind of get acclimated to some of those hazards. We bring in a unique set of eyes and a unique skill set to look at some of those risks that they may not see on the day-to-day. So areas that might be tucked away in nooks and crannies that they are used to. So we can reference the OSHA regulatory standards and industry best practices, and even discuss some potentially fabrication of pieces of equipment to mitigate some of those risks. In terms of electrical hazards, I mentioned earlier in our conversation about lockout-tagout procedures. We have written a myriad of lockout-tagout policies, as well as what are called equipment-specific procedures. So if you have a certain type of unique piece of equipment that has multiple energy sources, we need to identify what some of those hazards are and how to de-energize those. Does a lock need to be installed on a disconnect device or at a breaker box to prevent an unexpected startup? So we at HRP have developed quite a few lockout-tagout equipment-specific procedures for employers to mitigate that risk.
So we talked a lot about the Focus 5, but obviously HRP's health and safety expertise and capabilities touch on much broader areas and tackle all sorts of other issues. What are some of those main ones that it's important for people out there to know about?
Absolutely. I know that we spend a lot of time on those Focus 5 hazards where the injuries are occurring, but there certainly are a lot of other areas in the workplace that can be hazardous. What we recommend once we've done our gap analysis is generally, if there are issues with lack of written programs, developing those, supporting those with different trainings and follow-up assessments, either internally or externally. In terms of some of the trainings that I can think of off the top of my head that we've developed that are applicable to many different employers are a hazard communication program, or what's called the right to know. In essence, employees have the right to know of what potentially hazardous chemicals they're working with, and likewise, they have the right to protect themselves from unwanted exposure. So if we need to resort to utilization of personal protective equipment or PPE, then we can help with development of programs to ensure that that's properly implemented, like a respiratory protection program or a hearing conservation program. Even things as simple as assessments to determine what is the right eye protection for a certain job task. For example, safety glasses might be appropriate for some applications, but if I'm working around chemicals and there's a splash hazard, then maybe safety goggles or a face shield might be appropriate for that type of task. So doing a job hazard assessment to determine what the right PPE is for that potential job task or job title is something we've done as well.
All right, Jonathan, while we're in this ballpark, let's keep going. Let's keep talking about what HRP can do out there. And because we've got a huge growing practice in the industrial hygiene area.
Absolutely. So, for example, if an employer is working with a potentially hazardous chemical and they're concerned about airborne exposure to some of their employees, or perhaps they've started to exhibit some unwanted symptoms, we can conduct what's referred to as industrial hygiene sampling or air quality sampling. In essence, we grab a sample of the air over a specified period of time and compare that to what the employee is exposed to or similarly exposed groups in that field. If there's other job tasks that are doing a similar type of operation, those filters that collect that air quality are sent, or the air samples are sent off to a laboratory for analysis. And from there, we compare them to occupational exposure limits to see if that concentration over a certain period of time is safe or potentially unsafe for that employee to be exposed to. And from there, we can make some recommendations to try and eliminate those risks. For example, are there engineering controls that can be put into place, a ventilation system to collect some of those undesirable fumes or vapors or dust that the employee could be exposed to? And in some instances, those options may not be viable, so we might have to resort to other options like administrative controls. If it's unsafe for that employee to be there for 8 hours, perhaps that environment might be safe for 4 hours. And then our last line of defense is PPE. And I mentioned earlier about conducting job hazard assessment to make sure we have the right personal protective equipment for the job.
So we're talking about industrial hygiene still, and there's two standouts that I thought were a little odd that they fall into industrial hygiene, but that is noise and mold. Is that right?
Yeah, I know that's kind of an odd fit for those, but indeed, in noise surveys, many industrial hygienists utilize their skill sets to determine, again, whether or not it is at a safe occupational exposure limit for employees to be around, or if we need to implement some other controls. It's often referred to in the health and safety industry as the hierarchy of controls. First off, is there a means of eliminating or substituting that product? Unfortunately, in noisy environments, we cannot always escape that. So secondly, is there a means of engineering? So can we put that noisy piece of equipment in an enclosure or encapsulate it in some way or put a muffler on it? If not, as I mentioned earlier with a chemical exposure, are there administrative controls that we can use, rotating of employees or restricting access to some of those areas, having badge access only to those noisy environments? And again, that last line of defense being PPE. So if we need to put people in some type of hearing conservation program where they're wearing muffs or earplugs or things of that nature. But the trigger for us is assessing what those exposures are, quantifying those based on a predetermined time and representative of what a typical employee exposure would be. And from there, we can determine what next steps are to protect folks. And in terms of indoor air quality assessments or mold surveys, the focal point there is generally to try and eliminate whatever the source of moisture is. Where's the water infiltration that's coming in? If it does come into place, though, sometimes that can lead to undesirable health effects or respiratory distress, where individuals who are occupants in those structures can be exposed. So if we can quantify some of those levels and determine what they are, again, we can determine what next steps are to try and eliminate those undesirable exposures.
Okay, we've talked about the IH side, but a huge part of what we do at HRP is the process safety management aspect of it. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, process safety management is pretty technical stuff. So succinctly, for individuals, employers, or companies that may be handling large quantities of potentially hazardous, toxic, flammable, combustible types of materials, we have to play the what-if game. Unfortunately, catastrophic events do occur, but we have to be prepared for that. So process safety management is the OSHA element of this to try and identify what do we do to mitigate those risks. If there are changes in equipment or processes, how do we track some of those things? If we have contractors that might be working on site and making some of those adjustments, changing out a valve or something along those lines, then we want to make sure that there are proper written procedures in place and discussions had with the host to try and identify those and protect against those catastrophic types of events.
So, Jonathan, can you give us a specific example of one?
Sure. A common area that I see is employers that may be using anhydrous ammonia for refrigeration purposes. There is what's referred to as a threshold quantity. Once a certain amount is exceeding that threshold, that quantity, then it triggers the need to have a process safety management program in place. With anhydrous ammonia, for example, it's 1,000 pounds. And it's not just necessarily within one tank, but it's used in all of the process. So it could be in different pipes that are running throughout the facility. So depending upon what the chemical is, it's kind of up to the employer to determine what that threshold is. And that's a gap that we at HRP can help with supporting with. If you are concerned that you have a highly toxic or hazardous chemical, we can support to determine whether or not you're exceeding that threshold quantity and help with development of an effective process safety management program.
Well, Jonathan, this has been a exceptionally educational experience as well as a pleasant one. So thank you so much for joining us for the Work Hard segment of this 312 podcast.
Likewise, Tom, I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to our next conversation, sir.
Yeah, and of course, welcome to HRP.
Thank you, my friend.
And now that we have said welcome, we will be saying farewell to Everett Anderson over in the Play Hard segment of this 312 podcast. We'll be joining you there shortly. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Play Hard section of the podcast. I'm here with Joe Cardinale.
Hi, everybody.
And joining us for the last time, most likely, from Houston, Texas, is Everett Anderson, who we are, as you know, if you listen to the Work Hard segment, bidding a fond farewell to. Everett is moving on to the next stage in his career. So we are here touching base with the three folks that started this thing to have one final farewell chat.
What did we talk about the first time? Does anybody remember?
That's a great question.
I don't remember.
You don't get to look it up.
Oh,
You have
I
to
do
try to
remember. I remember.
Yeah.
I guarantee you I could tell you, just guessing, it's got to do with Star Wars, Marvel, or video games.
That was definitely in there, but
We did, it was like technology from our past that's like outdated.
mm-hmm.
Basically that like you use,
that's right. Pager.
that you use like
Pager.
every day that just doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's something that's like a very familiar piece of technology for you that just like doesn't exist anymore?
I mean,
people are.
For me, it was
I know what I
Pager, but that
used.
only lasted like a hot minute.
Yeah.
That wasn't very long.
Which one did you have, Everett?
I had the overhead projector.
Mm.
The good old school overhead projector.
Which they still had like in high school when I was there.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was like
For
they
sure.
were using that had some legs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's because schools didn't want to spend all the money to upgrade their systems. So
Yeah.
we're gonna hold on to this one. For
They
a
had like
while.
one smart board.
Yeah, now they all do.
Mine was a VCR.
Mm.
And that lasted a while. Too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
I feel like that's like made a comeback, like a kind of like
VCR.
kind of like a record player kind of deal.
Yeah, maybe.
Like
No,
people
I will
will
never-
bust out, people will bust out like the old CRT TVs and like watch like an old VCR film.
I can't see my kids putting in a VCR and trying to fast forward or get to a place in the movie where they can't just use their finger and move it across.
It's
How do I
definitely
fast forward?
it's definitely not kids doing it though. It's like people my age that like just want to be a child
that's
again.
true, yeah.
So, Everett, what are some of your favorite memories from your, was it 7 years at HRP?
Yeah, just about.
Was it me bothering you when I was when you guys were outside my office? Me coming over?
I feel like it was the other way
Half
around.
an hour. Yeah, you definitely bothered me, you guys.
That's right.
You guys both bothered me more than I bothered you.
That
back
is
then.
true. That is true.
It's a funny thing, we used to all sit pretty much together.
What do you mean?
I mean, there was a time when Everett and I sat next to each other, and you were like one or two
Yeah.
offices down the hall, like close enough to be in the conversation without having to get up.
I could hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could
No,
still
you-
hear you.
You were glad because we just kept you from working.
Yeah. Any kind of distraction from work is great.
Let me think here. Definitely. So when I first started, I started in October. And if you don't know, if you're listening, October, November, December, January is like there's a party. I feel like every week.
A good size one too. Not the little ones. These big ones.
I mean, between like Oktoberfest, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas business plan, like all that stuff happens. I feel like immediately. So like my first 6 months, I was like, I guess people just like party every week. I don't know. I remember like coming home and my mom being like, what are you doing this Friday or whatever? And I'm like, oh, there's another party. And she's like, wow, you get a lot of parties going on in that office. And then my first Thanksgiving, that was the first time we ever did the beer pong tournament.
Was that me and you?
I think that was me and you when we almost won, and then you dropped me for the rest of history. Since you're the one that couldn't make any shots, but it was my fault apparently.
So I won the next year without you, so I don't know.
I'm sure you had a lot to do with that too.
Yes, me and Rich.
What do you think's changed the most since you started here, Everett?
My hairline.
Yeah, it's actually pretty dramatic, honestly.
Your teeth have shrunk.
My waist's grown. I guess I'm supposed to laugh that much.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, okay.
I'd say the biggest thing that's changed, I feel like there's more people are involved in like keeping the culture going. I know like initially when I had started, there was like the fun committee where we would try to plan things, and I feel like that kind of dissolved quickly. And then
but it's back, baby.
And then it was a lot of pointing fingers on like who's doing what, and then stuff doesn't happen because people are just busy. And now I feel like there's a focus around making sure that stuff continues, and we do something at least like once a month, which I think is good because it's easy to be like, oh, I'm gonna miss one meeting, and then all of a sudden you've missed 7 in a row, and then 8 other people have done that, so then nothing happens. You can get kind of stuck in it, but I feel like that even new people that have come on have really bought into it, and it really keeps it going even after COVID and all that stuff, and trying to get people back in the office and all the things that are kind of a hindrance to creating and maintaining a company culture. So I've definitely noticed that even remotely, people are involved and want to be involved. So that's been cool.
Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot to say something nice about Everett's time here.
It's hard to say nice about anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Something nice about Everett.
You had 7 years to think of something.
Ooh, you should have warned me before this. Do I have to say something work-wise? Because I don't know what you
Whatever you can manage.
I don't know what you guys do. You guys play on the internet, make videos. Looks like fun. Doesn't seem like work to me.
I know.
No, what I'm going to miss the most about Everett, well, I guess it's an odd question because Everett's not going away for me or for you, so I'll probably be talking to Everett just as much as I do now.
Probably more, honestly.
Yeah, maybe. No, so I mean, for me, there's nothing really, no offense. I think I miss more whenever it was in the office than anything. Mm-hmm. It was fun with the three of us.
Yeah.
Especially the two, me and Everett, bothering you.
Uh-huh.
That was the best, talking about movies that you absolutely hate that we love. Those were always the best. Yeah, it was great having Everett in the office to talk to more. I mean, now that he's remote, it was a little less. But again, I don't think much is going to change with Everett moving to a different position. So,
well, maybe not for
job.
you.
Well, you asked me.
I should say something nice about it. Not talk about how it's going to affect you.
I did say something nice about it.
Okay.
A pleasure to talk to you. I love talking to Everett.
I want to compliment you, Everett, on how remarkable the growth in all of the areas has been of this company that you've worked in, the incredible impact that you've made on our social media presence that I don't think anyone else could have done. So I think thank you for being a part of that and for everything you did and all the help and guidance that you've given me and everyone here over the years.
See, and you had time. You thought of this question. You should have told me about this question.
He had that written down.
Yeah. He
Oscar
totally
speech.
had that ready to go.
No, thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. And I know that you will be just as vital a part of this new path that you're walking on. And as Jonathan and I talked about in the Work Hard segment, what's so great about this company, he actually cited this as one of the reasons why he decided to pick HRP as where he wanted to work, is we have this incredible alumni association that former HRPers can be a part of. So I do expect to see you at some of those alumni events, Everett.
Upstate New York this year.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's good to have, and nice to be in touch. And yeah, I hope to definitely make it out to one of those at some point.
We can have our own mini alumni events, just the 4 of us or 3 of us.
Yeah, I guess the first one's coming up next week when we have your little get together.
That's
You'll
true.
officially be gone by then.
That's right.
That's true. Yeah, don't tell anybody where it is though. We'll get my fans will be showing up.
Yeah, I don't want to dox you, bro.
Sandwich, Massachusetts.
I wish. I want to go to that place.
So when I went to the Cape last weekend, exactly where I had to drive by was the exits for Sandwich. I'm like, oh, should I just take it and like lie to my family what we're doing?
Yeah. She's like, oh no, I took a wrong turn.
Oh, I got a flat tire. I gotta go.
I've never been, but I feel like that place takes forever to get in. When we're talking about Treehouse Brewing Company's location, Sandwich, Mass, like right on the water.
I mean, traffic-wise, it wasn't that bad when I went, so I don't know. It was pretty good.
I would think it'd be mobbed though. The actual brewery location. I don't know. Have you ever been, Everett?
I haven't. I know Andrew went. My friend Andrew went recently. He said it was cool. I don't think they had much issue getting in and out of it. I think it might.
It's small, isn't it?
It's not big, but it's. I think they have like a decent like parking situation, which I feel like I can't picture because I've like you can't park anywhere in Cape Cod, so I have no idea how they have a parking lot. But I think it might be one of those things that like everyone thinks it's so hard to get to, so no one goes to it.
Yeah.
So it ends up being like not busy, but just kind of like normal compared to their other locations. But who knows?
That I'm showing Tom. That is Treehouse Woodstock right there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, my friend went there.
That looks awesome.
Very small location. Yeah. He said there's like 12 people there because it's so small.
Yeah, they own like a farm or something, right?
Yeah, it's one of the farms. But that was the pictures of that. I could send it to you.
I want to send it to myself.
Oh, there you go.
I want to go to the new golf course that just opened.
Where's that?
Tewksbury.
Tewksbury, that's right.
Tewksbury.
Yeah, it looks awesome. It's only a 9-hole course, but they renovated the whole clubhouse and everything. They like this giant beer hall. It looks cool.
Never golfed. Never once golfed. Not once, not never.
Not that it's a different topic, semi-different topic. Would you ever see that video of people trying to pronounce Massachusetts town names?
Yeah.
I think so,
That's the best. Just going through the Cape and driving and seeing all the town names, I just always think of the video of them trying to say Taunton.
Yeah, there's some good ones.
You never know what you're going to get there. There's still so many places I've seen that I like. That can't be a real place. It can't be a place called Braintree.
Yeah. What's Schenectady?
That's in New York.
I know, but still. I remember driving
Crazy stuff. We're talking about wild names now.
That was the first one I was dating my wife, and they had a house in upstate New York, and we're driving. I'm like, what is Schenectady? What is that town?
Yeah, there's some good ones.
Yeah, we still need to do that podcast though of Star Wars names. I'm never gonna let that go.
Yeah, you're gonna have to come back as a special guest. Yeah,
we'll need to come back for that.
That's true. It was our idea, so we definitely have to do it at some point.
100%. He's got to be back for that.
Absolutely.
Tom's got to brainstorm some ideas, some names.
Well, this way we get you on, and then everybody at the place that you work is going to have to subscribe to the podcast.
Oh, there we go.
It's true.
I expect you to start evangelizing. When you get there. I've taught you the ways.
How big is that company
HRP.
that you're going to?
Basically, like there's one company that started in St. Louis, and they branched off into like 3 or 4 separate companies. And this is one of those companies.
Yeah.
But they all still like work together on projects. So it'll be interesting. I'm excited.
We're talking about what changed for you from when you started to when you finished. When you started working here, you were living in a studio apartment with your fiance. Now you own a home in Houston, Texas, and
was
have
it girlfriend at the
a
time?
newborn.
Sorry, wasn't it girlfriend? Was it even was it fiance?
I think it had to be because you got married pretty much right away. As soon as you started working here, I mean.
No, when I started working here, we were just dating.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, hey.
Wow.
2016.
So really, you have us to thank for
You're
your
welcome.
family and home.
That's true.
Yeah. Because
That's
you didn't
true.
have those things when you started here.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the big things. Like the transition of moving here and being able to stay on and not worry about finding a new job and still having some source of comfortability with being in a new area, not have to worry about being in a new area and at a new job and with new people and a new state and new driving and new everything. It was nice to have that transition be kind of taken care of, and already know everybody I knew. Easier to work with all those people remotely, obviously. So yeah, that was really good, and it was a big change in my life, and like you said, it's I've gone through a lot of changes since I've started personally. So it's been good, and it's definitely something I won't forget for sure.
And where is baby Ivy? She sleeping?
She was asleep
Quiet
last time
over
I checked. She is quiet. She's
downstairs.
She's very
She wants you
content.
to wake
Grilling.
up the baby for a cameo.
I do want to
pod.
wake up the baby. I want to see her. All right.
All right.
Oh, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
She's coming drinking with us.
It's coming to the bar.
Gotta get her tolerance up. She'll never be able to party.
That's
Or
right.
supposed to
Yeah, I made the mistake of not having my kids drink. They hate alcohol right now.
do. Yeah.
It'll change.
No, nobody's perfect.
Nah, can't be perfect.
You try.
I try.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to wrap us for Play Hard. Everett, it was really great getting to have you on the podcast one last time.
Bye, Everett.
It was
Congrats,
good. Thanks
good
for
luck.
having me, guys.
See you soon.
See ya.
Best wishes, bud.